am born to powerful women. They've made policy and law, run companies and political parties. My country elected one of the world's first women prime ministers and presidents. And yet, though I come from relative privilege, the promise of freedom and equality made to me as a little girl, and to girls around the world, have not been met. Discriminations, economic equality, and violence are tied up. The Indian female workforce participation rate actually dropped from 36.7% in 2005 to 26% in 2018 in India. In Delhi, my hometown, only 11% of women work. At the same time, reported cases of violence have increased. I saw the power problem young. Even some of the privileged women I speak of ate last, did all the housework and all the managing, were diminished by their families. Others were beaten at home and raped, legally raped by their husbands. I realized that around the world, law has been made by the most privileged, able-bodied, straight men. Law codifies power. Globally, it is still mostly made and enforced by the patriarchs of the race and religion that rule locally. So here's one way that legal power flows. From constitutions, because those are the broad litmus tests against which legislations and court decisions are tested. Delegated legislation, rules made by governments, and governmental action, broadly. Through the United Nations, therefore, I contributed to Nepal's interim constitution. I worked with the Maldives Attorney General's office and their Supreme Court, bringing in progressive interpretations of Sharia on making their enlightened constitution work. Traveling through bunkers in Afghanistan, we focused on the rights of women and children in that constitution. With broken down systems, broken down rule of law, we started together to try and build something, or rather, I advised and the people working there really did the main work. This work was very exciting, but it was abstract. And then in 2012, in my city, in my hometown, in Delhi, there was a rising. And women, men, and children came out onto the streets against a brutal gang rape on a bus only 3 kilometers from my home. I, like most Delhi girls, grew up with molestation and leering, and it was normal. But in those heady December days, my city said with one voice that violence isn't just women's problem. It's all our problem. Government's very existence is to protect our freedoms. The young woman gang raped in the case had gone to see a film. A few years before, on the same streets, a woman going to work had been raped and killed. These are stories that come to us every day. Women are hired for fewer jobs because it's unsafe to travel late, or because paternalistic laws ban their work on night shifts. The movement was clear, though. This movement was clear. It was about bekhauf azadi, about freedom from fear. Freedom from fear is what we sought. Away from the mindset of protection and keeping women at home, away from jobs, away from power, away from fun. Registering rape complaints was made stricter. If the police official failed to do so, failed to register the complaint, they could be jailed themselves. Stalking, voyeurism, and forced disrobing, particularly a crime that is perpetrated by caste men against women of so-called lower castes, were added to a list of specific crimes against women. In Indian law, the standard of consent is now high. So consent must be clear, it must be unequivocal and voluntary. So only yes means yes, which is above no means no. Our foremothers and their movements made sure that Indian law gives serious weight to an assault survivor's testimony. If it withstands cross-examinations and court scrutiny, a rapist may be convicted by his victim's consistent, credible testimony alone. We have moved forward. India's conviction rate for rape hovers around 26%. In this country, it is 3%, and in South Africa, it is 8%. And that primarily is because of the weight that is given to the victim's testimony in our jurisdiction. Most rapes aren't reported, though. In India, about 90% of rapes are by husbands or partners. Raping your wife is legal. The law is part of our colonial heritage. It was made up by Lord Hale here. He literally made it up and exported it around the world as colonialism was exported. It comes from the English medieval doctrine of coverture, and the principle is that a man owns his wife. So even here in England, a married woman couldn't own property, though a single woman could. And marital rape was legal even here until the 1990s. I'm leading arguments in court to have the marital rape exception struck down as unconstitutional. Our government, and many before it, say explicitly that the state must protect the institution of marriage. They are in effect saying rape is part of the institution of marriage. The government is joined in its opposition by a few so-called men's rights associations, and to counter them, an organization called the Forum for Engagement of Men have joined our case to support women's freedoms from assault. They join us in saying women's bodily integrity is non-negotiable. They wish to have equal partners. A woman who can't say no is reduced to a subject, a sexual object. If she can't say no, a yes has no meaning. The worst violence is silenced, and the ability to say a free and joyful yes is taken away from married women. What about inside the office? Women's bandwidth at work gets taken up in part by discrimination and sexual harassment. So you have to work harder, be more talented, and deal with the harassment and discrimination effectively if you want to get anywhere. And then we wonder why we have fewer women at the top. Anti-sexual harassment law provides a code of workshops and policies and an enforcement mechanism that can stamp down harassment in formal workplaces really quite effectively if it's implemented. Women speaking out in India's most recent wave of the Me Too movement has, to an extent, in companies realizing it is in their interest, has made companies rather realize that it is in the company's interest to comply with the law, to avoid civil, criminal, and reputational liability. But there's a catch. So if a man touches you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, baby," there are a lot of criminal laws and employment laws that will protect you. But if he yells at you and he says you're useless because you're a woman, he says so explicitly and it's on camera and everything, the law is silent. So we have made equality policies that these expand the sexual harassment code to non-discrimination. These use the draft laws on non-discrimination. We don't have formal laws passed by Parliament, so we are bringing them into policy for workplaces to provide the remedies despite the successive government's failures. And these policies bar discrimination on the basis of gender, caste, race, sexuality, and religion. Organizations are signing up. They're starting to recognize that patriarchy suppresses talent, that it means that hirings keep coming from the same small pool of men. They are starting to recognize that equality speaks to their bottom line. By the time a woman is raped or denied a pay raise she deserves, the damage is already done. Real justice comes when a woman's confidence in her bodily integrity allows her to have late drinks in a short skirt with a man she doesn't know, to work hard and know that she will be rewarded for it without pandering, to be disabled from a so-called lower caste, to be a trans woman, and know that she doesn't have to be very tough or very soft because she's a woman. To just be human and have the same chance at flourishing as everybody else. So bringing equality, I think, is ultimately about norm shifting. And yes, we do this through the law. And yes, we do this through a system of penalties and also rewards. But also I am collaborating with a leading corporate, ITC Vivel, to bring workshops on legal rights in the first tranche to 600 Indian colleges. We are also creating animated legal primers online. The first round is in Hindi, and the first got 6 million views. The first video got 6 million views. We do this so a tide may rise to claim rights against the legal system, and so that police and courts be forced to respond in turn to women and queer people. We also see subtle but immediate shifts in behavior and power between students in these workshops once they know the law and know the power that resides in them. Each woman or queer person violated who complains bears the brunt of legal attrition, but each conviction, each success makes the path to justice wider for others. But power is tenacious. The backlash is already here. As fascisms rise around the world, the heteropatriarchies rise with them. At the rate we are going, complete wage equality for women will take 170 years globally. There's very credible studies that say so, and in India, 400 years. 400 years. This is changing. No longer does the single woman at the table guard her turf. Most recognize that our rights are to at least half the table and often the head. There are gatekeepers among the patriarchs that rise above their own narrow interests to open doors to equality. For the most part, though, power is taken. Power is not granted. And power cannot stop at the white women. It cannot stop at the able-bodied straight women, upper caste women like me. The Me Too movement, our latest rising, is a civil disobedience against legal systems that don't serve women. It was time 400 years ago to seize power and voice, to seize freedom from fear, to claim the time to play. It's time now.